Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Patrick Temple West of the Financial Times and our esteemed panel.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Temple West. I'm with the Financial Times. And I noticed in the room next door, they're starting to set up the drinks. So the only thing between you and the drinks are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. A little bit of spinach before the drinks.
So we'll see if it actually matters.
Joining me today on this panel to talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals are Maria Fernanda Espinosa, former president Nations General Assembly, and now CEO of GWL Voices, Pierre Le Manh, President and CEO of Project Management Institute, PMI, Jenny Buccos, founder and CEO of Explore. The SDGs were adopted in September 2015, so we're about at the halfway point on the SDGs. And the UN says that on its current course, the world may miss many of the SDG targets. So with that, I'd like to start off with a question. We've 17 SDGs: combat climate change, preserve oceans, gender equality. How can project management practices tackle some of these big problems? Maria?
Well, first of all, I think it's excellent to bring to the conversations of contemporary world the usefulness of the Sustainable Development Goals. They were not only a political agreement at the UN, an abstract issue, but the Sustainable Development Goals are truly a design, a blueprint for building sustainable, peaceful, more equal, poverty-free, low-carbon societies. So I would say the SDGs are interconnected, even though we had to break the themes and separate oceans from biodiversity, from food security, in order to organize better. You said project management. It's because the Sustainable Development Goals allow for better planning, allow for better investment, allow for better decision making. After working 14 years as a government official, I can tell you that they are a useful organizer, for national planning and for prioritizing at the national level. I come from Ecuador, a developing country in South America, and believe me, we were able to organize our national planning, our project investment in terms of public money, but also private-public partnerships to deliver on the SDG. So extremely useful design to better organize governments and to better organize priorities and to better invest. Of course, I'm with you. 80% of the targets of the SDGs are off track today. And we are supposed to deliver on all of them until 2030. So we are really, really behind, and we need to scale up the finance, the capacity, the technology, everything that we have in hand to build a better world.
Jenny?
Great. So project management, how it can address the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not looking to move the needle on things. I'm looking to break the gauge. Mm-hmm. And I think what project management does, and just for a little bit of background, I'm actually a producer-director of television. Producing, directing is pretty much the same as project management. It allows us to ensure that we have taken perspective of our stakeholders. And for me, I primarily work in primary and secondary education. So making sure that our stakeholders have a literal seat and voice at the table. But then just, again, through the project management, we're going with the handheld now, a little more intimate. Making sure that we can budget, risk management, stay on time, and then measure the impact of what we're working toward. So if we're not on track to reach them, where are the pain points and how do we get back on track? But for me, it really is the diverse stakeholders and stakeholder analysis.
Pierre?
Yeah, I agree that the SDGs are a fantastic compass that at least give us a vision, a guiding star that we can all try to achieve. Maybe late, maybe not in a disciplined way or as disciplined as we wanted, but at least this gives us this guiding star, and I think it's really important for all of us. Now, of course, in the end, what matters is what is actually done on the ground.
On the ground.
And if you want to accomplish anything, any transformation, you need proper project management. This is what it is about, turning ideas into reality. So at Project Management Institute, we were founded actually in 1969, the year when a man was sent to the moon, and behind that was a project manager. Right? It was possible, hard but not impossible. And the same goes with the SDGs. Since then, our purpose is to maximize project success, to elevate our world. So there's a combination of doing things right and doing the right things. So very much in line with what the SDGs are trying to accomplish. We've grown into an organization that operates in 200 countries. We influence millions of professionals through education, through resources, platforms that we provide to them, professional certifications, so that organizations, governments, companies know that the project professionals who work on their projects are competent. So that's what we're really focused on. And we're also trying to use our position as a leading authority in project management to amplify great stories, great successes. What you're doing, Jenny, your organization, your fantastic National STEM Festival is one of the winners of our most influential projects of the year in 2024. And this is inspiring, especially for young generations, to see that things can actually be done. All you need to do is to learn a bit of project management, and that's what we do. And we want governments, organizations, companies across the globe to invest in training, supporting project managers so that we can go faster towards our SDGs and other goals.
Pierre, let me just follow up because you mentioned companies. How companies are looking to incorporate SDGs into their practices. How can companies which report to shareholders, have to produce profits, how can they incorporate SDGs realistically in a way that provides for the company practices but also a societal impact?
Yeah, how is I think there are two aspects in your question. One is having the competent people to do that, right? So you need to learn how to incorporate sustainability in your projects. Many project managers in the world ask me, I would like to do that, but I don't know how. It's not that difficult. You can learn how to do that. Many people have thought about it, how you can, in any kind of project, even if you're doing an IT project, you can think about how to incorporate sustainability. Different question is the CEO, the pressure they get from investors, the dictature of short-term performance, the measures of their own performance. And there, I think it's a matter of understanding that the society is changing, consumers are changing, citizens are changing, and the people who will be sitting here in 20 years from now do not think exactly as the people who are sitting here right now. And that will drive a lot of change. So if you're thinking long-term as a CEO, if you're thinking long-term, which is difficult as a politician because they rotate a lot, then you should focus on what people want long-term, and that's how things will move, in my opinion. Yesterday I was at the UN Global Compact Private Sector Forum. It's basically an organization where a number of CEOs and head of states talk together about what to do. There's a lot of finger pointing, of course, but I made a suggestion. Why do we have quarterly results? Why don't we ban quarterly results and only accept yearly results being published by listed companies? That will force CEOs to think a little bit more long-term and not be jittery and always the victim of whatever latest news might come out. Those are simple things we could absolutely do. The world is not going to collapse because you don't have your quarterly reports. That's
so interesting. Just as an aside on that, I mean, in Europe, it's a little bit different. So the U.S. companies raised that, and it came up during the Trump years. I was covering the Securities and Exchange Commission at the time, which obviously requires the quarterly reports, and there was some movement to change it. But it's just to get that inertia to break the quarterly cycle is just the will isn't there. Jenny, you're in the education space, one of the SDGs. Do you have any examples of sort of like challenges that you've seen in advancing SDGs, education being one, but others?
The entire education system is broken, and we've got 10 minutes left. I think I think that relevancy for education and youth and the SDGs and before that, the Millennium Development Goals. I've been in this space a long time. I think when we're working towards targets with young people and we want people actively engaged, we need to make it real world relevant and relatable. And that changes geographically. And if we want young people to get engaged and address, young people are brilliant. And I'm just gonna give you one example of a kid that participated in the STEM Festival this year. A 14-year-old who developed a $30 novel artificial pancreas who spent 3 years going through clinical trials and at 14 years old has a patent.
So one more time, sorry.
14-year-old who developed a $30 novel artificial pancreas, spent 3 years in clinical trials, and now has a patent. That's the level of innovation we have. Genius, creativity, ideas know no boundaries, but the barriers to entering to become an innovator, to become a change maker, do exist. So there are a couple things we need to do. Real world, relevant, relatable, and we need to make sure that young people are engaged in this process. Otherwise, we are not going to reach these targets, the next targets we set, the targets after that.
Thank you. Maria, thoughts on any examples you've seen either at the UN or GWL, challenges and how you might be able to overcome them?
Yeah, well, first of all, we know that we need $500 billion per year until 2030 to be able to deliver on the SDGs. And where is the money going to come from? It has to come from public and private money. It really requires a push, a commitment, the political will, the corporate responsibility to make the SDGs happen. If I have to pick one of the SDGs, I was just thinking, I had the privilege to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs of my country, the Minister of Defense, and I would pick SDG 5 on gender equality and women's rights. Because when we can't make the difference, you have to do it and do it fast. Because of what you said, Pierre, some politicians are experts in short-termism and thinking about next elections and not next generations. So the quicker you can do when you are a minister, I have a first-hand experience. Number one, when I was appointed foreign minister, as the first woman in my country, I asked the simple question, how many female ambassadors do we have in the service? And believe me, it was less than 3%. And affirmative action for more women in diplomacy, special treatment, incentives to have more women in diplomacy. When I was Minister of Defense, basically a policy of zero tolerance for sexual harassment in the armed forces, a special system to promote women in higher position in the armed forces, and a full engagement of women in all the peace planning, the conflict prevention and resolution, and also the humanitarian deployment that is more and more needed nowadays, especially when countries have to be prepared for climate shocks, for example. And so I think that the SDGs are extremely, extremely helpful to take the right decisions when you can take the decisions in the public space and as decision makers, but also when you have to plan and prioritize investment. And I'm so happy, that the private sector is behind this, but I think that we need to go, to scale up the efforts of the private sector. When they invest, they believe and they plan, using the Sustainable Development Goals as this compass, this organizing principle, as you mentioned. And of course, I think I'm with you also with the idea of education being at the center of this, not only of the younger generations, but education of society, education about the way we do business, education about the way we consume and we produce and we interact with each other. I think that's basically, what the SDGs was a wake-up call for humanity, and I really hope that they continue to be, the guiding flag for a better future.
You mentioned in there public-private partnerships. Can you talk about how have you seen both successes and challenges in the project management sector involving both governments and companies.
SDG 13 on climate change. You know, there's no way that we are going to be able to transition to a net zero and fossil fuel-free societies by 2050 if we do not engage the private sector in investments of renewable energies and low carbon technologies in general, if you speak also about infrastructure. So, for example, SDG 13 will be impossible if we do not bring the private sector in and we pair, you know, what we call now the blended finance efforts together.
Same question for you, Jenny. I mean, education has a high touch point, government, private sector. How do you see the project management aspect of that working, and what challenges come up?
A lot of challenges. I just spent a year working with the federal government. I think that the public sector provides policy and framework, and that becomes a roadmap to help bring in the private sector. I also think in certain countries, in certain situations, in certain geographic regions, having that partnership is incredibly powerful. And I'm going to speak specifically to what I did. So I ran the first national science fair STEM festival in the United States that's been done since 2010. It was specifically under the White House administration. It is now a public-private partnership. Without the government involved, we would not have been able to get this off the ground because nobody knew who we were. There was no credibility. There was no way to engage. We have 50 states and 5 territories. How do you engage 74 million children without having the government involved? A corporation can't do that. An individual can't do that. One small nonprofit can't do that.
Super.
Great. Pierre, I wanted to ask, you know, people are, 2025 is really just around the corner. People are starting to put budgets together for 2025 now. Do you have any advice to people who are, as companies, private institutions are putting these budgets together, how they should be thinking about SDGs? I mean, do you have a couple pieces of advice or two about how they can budget for an SDG that were more of their choosings?
So, you know, I think the SDGs would be, because it's very interesting what you said, the public sector cannot do it alone. And I agree with it. Some big projects, some very large projects require public funding and regulations, by the way, so it's not going to happen without them being involved. But if I was really thinking about my budget for next year and think about SDGs, a lot of things require innovation. And like you said before, if a 14-year-old can come up with what they came up with, see, it's not always that much money. It's about unleashing the creativity, putting aside some money, not that much. You know, I have a principle, my team knows this very well, you know, the 10, 20, 70. You put 10% of your investments in things that you don't know if they will work, right? It's just betting on the future, on innovation, then unleashing the ability of people, whatever their experience is. I mean, they need to know project management for sure, but apart from that, you need to give them the right to try and innovate and do things that you don't know if they will work in the end. And there's a good chance that some of this will work if we create energy, momentum, and that's how we will get to deliver on SDGs. Many of the solutions that will take us there are not known today, and they will come from people that we don't even know.
I mean, it sounds a little bit, you know, I don't know if Google still does this, but on the 5th day, everybody got to work on their pet project and see if that could become something that the company would be able to embrace. Is that kind of what you're...
moonshots.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's everybody, but you want to set aside some funding for that. That will, I think, make a big difference.
Yeah, and believe me, the world is in need of creativity and innovation. We are in big trouble. You know, all the crises, war, conflict, climate, displacement, migration, health challenges, we just heard the previous panel, etc. In basically what we need is creativity, is innovation, is the ability to work together. And, you know, our society sometimes does not create incentives for that, the space for that. And I recall the Google moonshot idea, which I think was brilliant. And that can also be done in the public sector. why not, you know, to really reward innovation? And I worked for a short period of time on an initiative called Creative Bureaucracies.
Wow,
and I think,
okay. Sounds like an oxymoron.
Exactly. I said the same phrase because I was invited to speak in a national summit of creative bureaucracies, and I said that. This is like an oxymoron. But it was a room full of public servants wanting to be innovators, to be change makers, and we need a lot of that, a lot of that. We need creative bureaucracies to also make change happen.
That's awesome. Jenny, did you want to say some final thoughts?
I was just going to say in school, we call that genius hour here. We give kids an hour to focus on anything they want that sparks joy,
fantastic.
that sparks their interest, and lets them just be the geniuses they are.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for. Thanks, Maria, Jenny, Pierre. Really appreciate your time. And I think that's a wrap for today. Thanks.
Super. Thank you, thank you, thank you.